Welcome to the Consciousness Anywhere and Everywhere podcast. I am Shannon O'Hara, and I invite you to a completely new world of possibilities. Welcome, everybody, to this special relationship episode of the Consciousness Anywhere podcast. If you're a longtime listener of the podcast or just tuning in, we explore many areas of life that consciousness, you can access greater consciousness in. And this is a conversation that's going to be between myself and my husband, Max.
Hi.
Who has been on podcasts in the past with me. We are looking at, through popular request, we are looking at putting on a Relationship 101 class in the near future. And this conversation, this podcast is kind of like a sneak peek, kind of a trailer, kind of a exercise for us to talk through what we would be inviting people to, working through what relationship is.
Because it's a tricky topic too. There is infinite possibilities for what relationships can be, what people desire, the difference that we all are, and when two people come together, that exponentializes the difference. So it's an exploration of choice. It's an exploration of questions for you guys to look at what actually works for you. Because Shannon and I have a relationship. It is the relationship that it is. What is it that you desire? What we would like to do basically is essentially ask you guys some questions and stimulate some awareness for yourself for what works.
Yeah. Just to give you guys some background, I'm coming from a very progressive Southern California family. I was not one of those little girls that dreamed of getting married. In fact, I don't even think I ever thought about marriage until it became, Max and I got married Max was living in Australia at the time. And I was essentially, it technically is called refused entry. It also could be called deportation. I was deported from Australia without the ability to come back. And the only way that we could be together, and at the time, Max had two young children.
In Australia.
Yeah, he still has two children, but they're no longer, they're
no longer young.
Now we have teenagers. So he needed to be in Australia and I was not allowed entry into Australia. And so the only literal way for us to be able to see each other, be together, was actually through a marriage visa. That was the only way I could apply to return to Australia to be with Max.
Which required us to get married first.
And that was like I was like, oh, okay. So I did not expect to be going here at this point, but we looked at it and that was the choice we made at the time. A lot of our relationship has been a growth of our consciousness independently and together. And I would say a huge premise of where we're coming from, well, I'll speak for myself, is the sort of the thesis that my father, Gary Douglas, who's the founder and creator of Access Consciousness, put forward in a book called Divorceless Relationship, where pointing out that most people divorce themselves to be in a relationship. How many of you guys have gotten into a relationship and essentially kind of like lost yourself? Gary, my dad, says that the majority of people no longer, once they get married, you sort of get down the track of that relationship and wonder where the person you married went, or the person you were when you got married, where that person went. And what occurs here so much of the time is that people don't gain more of themselves in relationships. They tend to lose large, if not all of themselves in relationships. Yep. So we're coming from the conversation of essentially the question of how do you have more of you? How does the person that you're in relationship with, are they getting more of them in the relationship? And what is relationship for, essentially? Mm-hmm. Obviously, we're talking about sort of like a love match relationship, but of course, this relates to every other kind of relationship that we have.
You can apply these questions and looking at it what is this relationship for? You can even apply that to your kids. It's probably more obvious when they're young, because obviously they require a lot more of you. That is a specific kind of purpose for raising somebody. But when they become older and then step into their own relationships, your relationship with them changes too. They choose their pathway in life. So your relationship will shift and change. So these are continuous questions. It's really interesting with our kids now being 18 and 15, like they're developing a lot of themselves. So we continually have to be in the question, what's required here? How do we individually decide to create these relationships?
So can you give an example of with kids, like when you said like you can use this question with your kids, like what's the relationship with your children for?
Yeah. So like Shannon said, if you weren't divorcing yourself in that relationship.
Yeah, but what is your relationship with your kids for?
Oh, for me personally?
Yeah.
Well, it's an exercise in consciousness once again. And for me, it's having more of ourselves, more choice. So for me, I've divorced myself quite a bit in regards to my children, and I've excluded myself.
Like as a parent, which I think a lot of parents can recognize. Like
totally. It's a very done thing in this reality. So for me, the question is like, how do I include what's relevant to me? What would I like to create? And then how do I include them in that?
Can we talk a little bit more about how we divorce ourselves in relationship?
How is interesting because I did it like automatically. I guess that's what I learned. And I was always looking at what do other people require? What do I need to be for this person? How do I change myself to make this more right, to either fit a fantasy or what I've seen before? And particularly for me, like what my parents had as a relationship, how they functioned with each other and what they created, which is insane because when I look at their relationship, I mean, they've been divorced for some time, but even like their relationships don't really work for them. They
weren't happy in their marriage.
They were not happy in their relationships.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So essentially we divorce ourselves in relationship, essentially at its most like fundamental base action through judgment. We judge ourselves in the relationship. We judge the other person. We judge what our relationship should be against a whole slew of stuff. Like, but essentially that's how we divorce ourselves is by judging.
Yeah. And to clarify what judgment is, it's essentially right and wrong, good and bad. But I want to add to that, it's even when you go should. When you say I should or they should,
you're shitting all over yourself. Yeah.
You're literally shitting all over yourself or somebody else. So there's forms of judgment that we don't really consider judgment. Yeah, like it's not like a negative judgment, so it's not.
And there's obvious. we judge a lot without even really recognizing we're judging.
Exactly. And over the years of being in relationship and becoming more aware, more conscious of my choices in relationship, I've really had to be very aware of when I should. Whenever I go, I should or they should, like I'm like, okay, no, I know that doesn't work. I'm going to cut that out. What's the question here? What's another approach, another question, another choice I can make here besides a should? Because a should is always a lie. Nothing in nature shoulds because it should. Nature creates. Nature is active in being and creating and receiving. So how can we have that more in our relationships?
And if we went to university, right? If we had a schooling system that educated us about like relationship mastery, like what would that be? We live in this weird dynamic where we come into the world and relationships are like, if not at the core, they are hugely impactful on our psychological development, our neurological development, our biological development, our sense of fulfillment in life or danger in life. Relationships we're constantly in relationship to the world. And are we like taught good tools? Are we taught how to be us, to have us, to honor ourselves, to honor others, to be an allowance of ourselves in relationship, to be an allowance of others? Usually not. We're taught, to be right by somebody else's point of view, or to fulfill mommy's dreams, or to, take care of or heal your dad, or like that becomes the primary operative. That's what relationship becomes for. It becomes for your parents or for you not to, make your parents uncomfortable, or because our parents are our first primary relationships. And for better or worse, that's where a lot of us learn how to then function in relationships later on in life.
Totally. And it's a very energetic learning. It's nothing cognitive. It's nothing like, you don't make like a clear choice. I'm going to be like my dad. It's energetically in our nervous system. We are entrained in certain ways and we choose along that too. And it's very non-cognitive, but it's strong in there.
So it's like if you were raised from day one with this, like, with this possibility of, okay, you're in the world, you get to be you totally. What are your relationships for? What are relationships for? And if you ask yourselves that question right now, it's like a lot of people, number one, have no clue.
Yeah.
Which that's like a danger sign. If you have no idea what relationships are for you, that means you're on autopilot.
And it's that's not a bad thing, but that's just an awareness. That's an awareness to have like, wow, okay, I actually have no clue.
It's not a bad thing to not have a clue. It's a bad thing to be unaware that you have no clue. And it's not bad to be unaware. It's becoming aware of where you're kind of negatively impacting the creation of your relationships due to a lack of awareness about your own universe. So what are relationships for is something that, in my humble opinion, and this is just my opinion, is seriously a panacea for getting you out of a lot of the dysfunctional relationships or the relationships that you're having or creating that are actually diminishing your life.
I would even add to that, like that question is like an opening. What I have required a lot, and I've seen be a benefit for a lot of other people, is then there is a huge toolbox of tools in Access Consciousness that you apply also to have more clarity with that first question of what are relationships for you. For example, what are you avoiding? Like, is there something that you're avoiding being? Is there something you're avoiding receiving? Yeah. And therefore you're not willing to engage with the question of, or unable to engage with the question of what are relationships for you? So that question to begin with then breaks down into a lot of different areas. And a lot of them are going to be in regards to you and your choice of what's actually true for you. What do you desire? And so my point being is there are so many other tools that are also required with this. So it's not just hammering this one question and expecting them to get somewhere. You will meander along different pathways of awareness and consciousness and exploration to have broader understanding for you about that question.
And it's like, wow, what if the relationships that we have contributed to us gaining greater awareness over a lifetime?
Yeah. And it doesn't mean it has to be the same relationship or relationships, but what if that was a priority with
This is something I wanted to indicate, because it was interesting, because Max actually brought up to me, I don't know, like a month ago, you brought this up about doing a relationship class together. And I was like, I had like a weird resistance to it. Mm-hmm. And I started really looking at that for myself. And we've had a lot of people come, primarily women, approach us and say, hey, would you guys do a relationship class? And I've had such a weird response to it. And if you don't know, I'll give you guys some context. Like, I facilitate consciousness for a living. My business is around the utilization of the tools of Access Consciousness applied to entity awareness, money, and all of the Access core classes. So I facilitate, I do classes, I host events for a living. So having resistance to doing one on the topic of relationship was like an interesting thing for me. But I looked at what I don't want to show up as a heterosexual spousal couple to the world and be promoting that I think that this is the right way to be in a relationship or to have relationship, because it isn't. This is just what we choose. And yes, it could be categorized as like normal comparatively. We're a heterosexual couple who's married, but it's like, that's not the message that you should be getting married or that you should be in a heterosexual couple.
At least that's not our point of view.
No.
It's like we're not saying this relationship is what we're talking about in the class. It is the questions for a relationship. Whether, and if we're talking intimate relationships, whether you desire one or not. Like Shannon said earlier, you have relationships because you're in this world, period. You're in relationship to everything, to whatever degree of distance. Because a relationship, the way that it is defined, is the distance between two objects, two parts. So whether they're two people or you and money, you and a business, what sort of distance would you like to have there?
What kind of a distance?
How close are you willing to get?
To yourself.
Yeah. Because you have a relationship with everything, including yourself and your body. And, it seems to be a part of what exists here. But we can also have communion. Yeah, what different reality, what different possibility is available here beyond relationship that we can use relationship for?
So what would you say your relationship has been for you?
Our relationship, like an intimate relationship, or
I guess.
What kind?
You can frame it however you want.
My relationship, let's say my relationship with you, because it's very unique, I would say. I've never had a relationship like this in my life prior, and I really value this relationship because you're so different and unique, and you make me greater. Like you inspire me, you push me. You don't live a lie in the relationship or in your life. So it's this element where I can't get away with stuff like I would in another relationship. I appreciate it. That's an element of it. But other elements are there's the joy that you have and that we can have together.
But what's it for you?
For expansion of my consciousness and consciousness generally. Like I really value this relationship for those things.
Yeah, but what's it for you?
More ease, more like joy in my life.
Yeah. And so with this question of like, what's relationship for you, it's like, if some of you guys might want to have a look at like, how much is relationship for fulfilling a need? Or for a lot of people, it's like replacing your own. Is it replacing, or is it like, that thing where like people do like, they don't feel like they're right unless they're in a relationship? Like you want to be
replacing themselves.
Yeah. Replacing yourself with a relationship. Or if you have a relationship, you're right. And if you don't have a relationship, you're wrong.
Which I would categorize as fitting in. Like in this reality, it's like fitting in is one of the key elements.
And that can be sometimes what relationships are for. It's for people. And if relationship is for fitting in or being right or being normal or being liked or being validated, what will that lead to?
And is that enough?
Is that enough?
Is that what you actually desire? So another element for me from that question earlier you asked about what is this relationship for, there's a sense of possibility.
Well, I didn't ask you what this relationship was for you.
Okay, well, that's what I answered it as. There's a sense of possibility in this relationship. Like I've had relationships in the past and there was like no future, there was no possibility.
Yeah.
And that was suffocating and deadening for me.
Right.
And I'm sure the other person as well. But it's just like
Yeah, Max was previously married. So, and I was not previously married, but I have been in many relationships. And I would say that that's what I bring to this relationship is like constant opening up to greater possibility.
Yeah.
But that's just who I be. So I don't just bring it to this relationship. I bring it to everything that I engage with in life. And the thing that I really appreciate that you bring to this relationship and into my life, that I would say isn't one of my natural go-tos or natural capacities, is you have an incredible amount of allowance for me, which has been a real salve for my soul. And you are like a really caring, kind person, which I didn't realize when I was younger wasn't a particularly abundant commodity amongst people. But as I got older and I sort of like looked back at my life, there's just has been so much like abuse and cruelty and judgment in so many of my relationships, in my closest family relationships, and then the sort of like the sex relationships I went on to have. And it's one of the things that I really, really value that you bring. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah.
And so for me, it's like this relationship makes my life easier in a ton of ways. And then in some ways, I have to choose to not give up what's possible for me if you're not willing to have it.
Mm-hmm.
Which is a thing. Like, and this is like the astrophysics, or the advanced physics of consciousness in relationship is like, do you ever give up on what's possible for you or what you'd like to have or choose or be due to your partner either not being able to come with you, not choosing it either. And then a lot of cases where your partner is actually actively against what you want to be or choose or have or be or change. And in our situation, you're not against me because you sort of know better than to, because I don't let, you don't go against me. But a lot of times, like, I have slowed down or stopped possibility for me because I knew you couldn't keep up.
Mm-hmm.
And there's been different cycles and processes of that through over the years. We've been together for, 13 years now? 12 years? 13?
Yeah.
I think
12,
we've been
13.
married for 12 years.
We've been married for 11 in April.
Okay. So we've been together, married for 11, together for 12.
12, 13.
13.
Yeah.
It's weird how we can. The start line is vague.
Yeah.
But so it's been these like cycles of recognizing. I remember in the first few years, I gave up a lot of like my money ambitions because you didn't want to have, like, you have had a sort of lifelong struggle with money, which is not really the point. The point is, like, I gave up a lot of my money ambitions and capabilities to a large degree because I didn't want to make you uncomfortable. And at one point I realized that, and I think it was something my dad asked me. He's like, have you, are you stopping yourself, because Max can't come with you or can't have it or won't have it? And I realized, like, it was. And I went, okay, wow. So it's like, if I continue to give up this possibility for myself, will Max leave me? If I have it, will he leave me? Do I want this relationship if it means I can't have all these other possibilities that Max can't have for himself?
Mm-hmm.
And I realized that in order for me to stay in this relationship, I had to have what is possible for me to have, whether you can have it or not. And I think that's something that we've worked out really well between us, is essentially you let me choose anything and everything I desire to choose. And nothing that I choose is against you or harmful for you. It's for me.
Yeah, which I'm totally aware of. And I think what you're talking about is a real key for everybody in relationships. Like, all relationships, you've got to be willing to look at this, because there is not one person that can have everything that you can have in life. Like, we're all different. We can have different things, and we have different ambitions. We have different capacities. There is nobody else that can have everything you can have. So if you're looking at somebody else or other people to be able to, then you're stopping yourself, period. So I think this is a real key for everybody.
Yeah, I think it's called allowance.
Yeah. And my process has been huge in this, has been to have allowance for me. Because for many years in our relationship, I was like, because you seemed so, like, you were ahead of me money-wise, you were ahead of me, like, you were clear what was valuable to you.
I do choose greater than you in a lot of areas.
Yeah, but I made that so right.
Choose greater than me in other areas.
Yeah. So I was looking at you and making those areas really right and making myself deficient for not, which is
your favorite thing to do to yourself.
Well, which I've done a lot of. Yeah. And so for me, I had to really come into allowance for me to be able to recognize what's actually true for me and what's relevant for me and what's, to have what's possible for me.
What are some of the things that are relevant for you and true to you?
Well, ease is one of those things that's important to me. Joy. Glory, I'm still working on.
I'd say the jury might still be out on joy too.
No, joy is of value. Like, because I've noticed when I've gone to more joy deficient areas, I'm like, oh, no. Whereas in the past, that would have been normal. That would have been just like a total normal reality. But, and wealth, like the wealth of living, which includes money, but then it's also like has the joy and has this abundance and the beauty of, like when I'm walking around here in England and it's like winter right now, so it's like less pretty than it can be, but it is just the magic. So the magic and the wealth of living is something that's really valuable to me.
So what would you say would be your top, it could be one, it could be two, it could be three, tools that you use in relationship, I guess with me or with the kids or sort of in your closest relationships?
So my first one would be, and Gary Douglas, I've had quite
shout out to Gary Douglas. We always joke around. There's really three of us in this marriage. It's me, Max, and my dad. And I know that could sound weird if you take it that way, but he is an incredible.
He was a huge gift for
facilitator.
Us, more intensively for quite some years at the beginning because we
required a lot of help to not destroy the relationship.
Well, to not destroy the relationship
and to not destroy ourselves
by other people's point of view. All sorts of stuff.
Oh yeah, other people's points of view. That's a whole other novel of.
Yeah. So one of the tools, and I knew this tools for years, and then I would have a conversation with him on the phone. And he'd be like, "Be interesting point of view." And I'd be like, holy shit, just the energetic way that he presented that, even though I knew it cognitively, just like changed my reality a number of times. And I realized how much more interesting point of view can be and what it can create. So in regards to relationships, that's one of my number one goes to, whether I have a point of view, whether the other person has a point of view, whether the other people have a point of view about something. It's like, okay, every point of view is just interesting. It doesn't mean anything. So if I'm able and willing to have every point of view as just an interesting point of view and then ask a question, that's where we can really access some different stuff. So that is like one of my number one things. The number two thing really would be asking and being in question. And all of these tools are muscles, so they develop over time.
So what are some examples of questions that you would go to in relationship?
Like, what else is possible?
Okay.
In any given situation is, because what I'm looking for, we can have examples of questions, but what I'm looking for is like the expansion of energy or a lightness coming into it. So what's right about this I'm not getting as well? If I'm having an upset or an issue or the other person's having an upset or an issue, then it's like, cool, interesting point of view. And what's possible here? What's right about this? What else can I choose? And the third tool, I don't know if this is a tool as such, but creating lightness from the situation, which kind of is interesting point of view, which is kind of question, but then also like changing the energy, whether it's a joke, whether it's like manipulating. Okay, manipulation, I guess you could call it.
You're really good at that,
manipulating the situation to create lightness, to change the energy, change the direction of a particular energy flow. Because I've noticed that is actually really required sometimes. Like when stuff gets really serious or significant and like both people are like fucking dogs in a fight, then like you've just got to throw in
a joke. You're great at that.
Throw in a joke or pull out your penis or whatever the thing is that changes the energy to something fucking different.
I love that.
And relationships. Everybody can relate to those situations.
As a recipient of that too, I will say that it's so helpful too. Because if you can get me to laugh, it really helps me like move past if I'm being really stubborn or I'm being right or I'm really like fixed in something. Like if I start laughing, it like really becomes the invitation for me to like change my point of view.
Yeah. So that would be my three. What about you?
Well, as corny as I think it actually sounds, gratitude has been, I would say, the biggest lesson for me to learn. I remember for the first several years of our marriage, total honesty, lean towards criticism as a person. It's not just of Max. I am like a critical person, which is sort of, I'm a little self-conscious to admit it, but I'm not judging it. I'm recognizing like, okay, I can be critical. This can be a superpower and it can be also poisonous.
There's a huge strength in acknowledging your negative.
Yeah, like your the negative things about you that aren't. It's not that it's something that's wrong about me. It's something I just have to recognize. Like I do tend towards criticism as like a place to function from in life, and I would be so like cranky about the relationship or frustrated with you. And I remember I'd go to my dad and just be like, Max did this and Max did that. And he'd go, and I'd be like, what do I do? Like, I'm just so frustrated. And he's like, well, are you grateful for him too? And I'd be like, fuck no. I am not grateful for him. I'm in judgment of him. And he's like, okay, so you want to like create some separation and drive him out of your life? And I really had to look at it. I was like, am I trying to actually drive him away? And I realized I was trying to create separation. Mm-hmm. I was like, fuck, why am I trying to destroy this relationship? And then I would like really take a survey. I'd be like, well, is the relationship working for me? And if I would get out of my reaction, out of my criticism, and out of my bitch face, and I'd look at it and it'd be like, yeah, I mean, it's working for me. And then I would go through, I'd like indulge in this whole process of like, if we weren't together, like, might my life expand? Would I be happier? And it staying together was always my preference. Even when I was like, Max is a fucking asshole. I hate this relationship. I can't stand being married anymore. Da, 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 da. And I'd look at that and I'd be like, wow, like, my dad would just be like, well, how about you find 3 things that you're grateful for about him? And it took me, full disclosure, I'm not proud of this, brutally honest, it took me years to be able to get to gratitude. I don't know why gratitude is such a weakness for me, but it's certainly something I've had to consciously cultivate.
I'd say it is that for most people too.
But once I started prioritizing and focusing on what I was grateful for about you, it completely changed the energy flow in the relationship. And my God, did I get happier.
I would agree. And just a side note on how Shannon's giving this example, and she also mentioned it took her years to change this thing or to work on it and to really like build that muscle. We have both in this relationship made a lot of choices that made this relationship work. If we didn't make certain greater choices, we would not be together today.
Yeah, because
if Shannon continued to be critical like that, I know that I would have left the relationship by now.
Yeah, or I would have driven you away. Yeah,
for something different and for something greater allowed this relationship to work. And it's been the same the other way around.
Yeah.
I've had to make certain choices that would allow this relationship to grow and be what it is.
Yeah, because we're not looking at maintenance in this conversation and in this relationship either. We're looking at creation. That can we create more together than we can apart? Gratitude has been huge for me, and I think it's funny. Like I go into so many details around this. It's like when you're in a relationship, you need to look, I'm not just saying like, just be grateful for the other person, because you also do need to be aware if like you're in a relationship with somebody that isn't like, it isn't working, and you can't just like smear gratitude over the top of something that doesn't work. Right. It's not a Band-Aid. It's a creative tool. And so it has to, like, the gratitude really has to start with you. And like gratitude has worked in our circumstance because you're actually like a great guy. You're not like, you don't gaslight me, you don't undermine me, you actually desire for me to have greater.
So if someone's not sure if the other person's a great person, what I would recommend is, what are you grateful for about you? Like, apply the gratitude tool to yourself and your life. What are you grateful for? Because that is a creative energy regardless. And then it will make what is true more obvious.
And if you're right, so if once you get clear on what you're grateful for about you, then you can ask, okay, so does being in a relationship with this person, does this person increase these qualities of gratitude these qualities that I'm grateful for? Do they make these qualities greater, or do they diminish them?
Yeah. So what would be your number 2? Tool.
being like greater, like being a bigger person. Because in all marriages and in a lot of relationships, well, I can imagine that this isn't the case in some marriages, but I don't know what the circumstance of those marriages would be. But you have to deal with money, kids, the logistics of managing a household, like life, vulnerability, sex,
your family stuff, like
family
everything you're aware of from like your parents, that you've been doing forever.
Yeah. For me, I guess I can use this. I can explain this through the lens of money the most. We've had to work around money stuff a lot in our relationship, and I remember there were points where I would have or could have left the relationship due to money. And I looked at that and I went, okay, so is money worth giving up or losing this relationship for? And I realized that what was actually occurring, it wasn't that there was like a money problem. It was that I had all these points of view about the way that money should work or should be in the relationship, what you should be providing financially, what I should be providing financially, like what it should look like. And frankly, the relationship just wasn't matching that.
Right.
And so I had to be like, okay, so I can hold on to these like fixed points of view about money and Max and should and shouldn't and blah, blah, blah. Or I can get over my point of view, which is like being a bigger person, like get over my point of view. And
I would say too, it's not about being bigger than another person. Sometimes, yes, it might be like that, but it's like just being bigger in the perspective, in the what's possible.
Well, in my head, really literally, I ask myself, okay, so if I was being a greater person, a bigger person, what would I do within this situation?
Yeah.
And I had to be really honest with myself that a lot of times I was being really petty and like making you wrong. And that is a dynamic that is so prevalent in relationships, making the other person wrong,
absolutely,
being petty, getting like potentially losing decades of your life over the pettiest shit,
or a whole life,
and just to make the other person wrong.
Yeah.
Or and I would be brutally honest with myself. I'd be like, okay, so am I making him wrong? Am I being right? And it was like, yeah. I was like, okay, that's not gonna work.
Great.
And I know for me, like that's not fun. Like first of all, it's just not fun for me. Like I want to have fun, and being right and making you wrong and like being, it just, so for me, it's like making the greater choice, like getting over my points of view and admitting where I'm wrong, admitting where I'm trying to be right, admitting to myself all this stuff, not even admitting to you, but being honest with me, like being greater for me in this. So that's number 2. Number 3 is scary. Number 3 is like being open no matter what, which brings up so much weird subconscious reaction in my world as a female. Being open, I don't know if it's like a female thing. I don't know how else to define it. Like, I don't even know what that means, but I know that for me, like being open is the key to changing a lot for me. So that's like a new priority for me.
Yeah. We can have an update about this in a year or two in another relationship podcast.
Because if I'm honest, like I wouldn't have said that I would have had like particularly like the capacity to really acknowledge where I wasn't being open. Now the only way I sense that I'm open is due to this horribly intense energy that I want to fucking get away from, which is sort of like, and it's sort of like having this open wound that I'm trying to protect, but I know that I have not vulnerability is like a cousin to this openness. But vulnerability, I think it doesn't quite do the trick that opening does for me. But I think we all have our own key, and like there's a more specific frequency for each of us.
And if you're noticing that the audio quality is going a bit funky here, that's an
my
energetic thing.
It's because my energy is like going bonkers. So vulnerability and openness, which has been a struggle for me, at least this layer, this place of opening.
Yeah.
And then doing it publicly and inviting a whole bunch of people into it is like, I call access consciousness this like group therapy. We change deeply together. We don't need to do this stuff always in private.
Yeah, there's nothing to hide. There's no secrets. There's
there's tons of stuff to hide. But if we hide stuff,
but will we?
It's like if we live a life of hiding, like what are we allowing to control us?
Yeah. And it doesn't mean you have to expose everything to other people either. It's the hiding from ourselves, the stuff that we aren't willing to, like the stuff that we're avoiding, the stuff we're defending against or for, or trying to prove, that gets in the way of us having us. Yeah. So this has been a big podcast, a long podcast. And thank you, Shannon, for asking me for being on the podcast. I'm grateful.
I think I realized why I've been having reactions to people asking about a relationship class, because it's going to require of me to be open in a way that I haven't chosen till now.
What a beautiful gift.
Thank you for listening to this show. My target is to make consciousness easy to find and choose. So if you enjoyed this podcast, please leave a 5-star review on iTunes and share this with somebody who who might be looking for more consciousness in their life. You can visit me on shannon-o'hara.com or talktotheentities.com. And to learn more about the amazing tools of Access Consciousness, you can visit accessconsciousness.com and be sure to subscribe to the podcast.